It's time to get inside the Giants Huddle.
Let's go.
On Giants.com.
I like it.
And the Giants mobile app.
Boom, give me some juice.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's roll.
Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk. Our guest today, we're joined by Andrew Catalon. He's calling the game on Sunday afternoon. Giants and Seahawks on CBS at 4:25. Rare, Andrew, we get two NFC teams showing up on a CBS broadcast.
John, great to see you and be with you. And I know we're getting a little more used to it. I mean, last year I had Giants Commanders on CBS. And now this week, another NFC matchup. As an NFC guy growing up, I like it. We don't get it too often, but I'm happy for it.
Now, as fans that might not know, Andrew and I go back because we used to hang out up in Albany when the Giants did training camp up there in Albany, up until 2012 was the last year there, I think. They went after the lockout in 11. They went back for one more year, I think. So that's how, Andrew, you have a lot of long-term ties to the Giants covering up there in Albany.
Yeah, no doubt. Grew up in New Jersey, so familiar with the Giants as a kid, and then worked in Albany for a while. Covering training camp was, to me, one of the biggest highlights of that job. And seeing you and seeing the Giants every day in the hot summers in Albany was definitely a great memory for me.
Yeah, and look, we miss it, to be honest with you. It isn't quite the same being in the same spot. Albany was fun. You get the campus. We'd all bring our bicycles. We would bike from the dorms to campus every day. You would walk around. Everyone would be around. It was a really nice atmosphere.
I loved it too. I mean, obviously for me, it was great to have them in our backyard when I lived up there. I just do think there is something to get away from home for a little while. I think it does bring a team closer together. Now, a lot of teams don't do that as much anymore, or they don't do it for as long. But those were great days, and I think it really helped the Giants back in the day as well.
Yeah, no question. All right, I'm sure you've already started talking to your producer and everything on Sunday. What are some of the major storylines and topics you guys are keeping an eye on for Giants and Seahawks on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, I think for the Giants, it's, is Malik Neighbors going to be out there? That's a huge part of the game. And I think, can they, find the end zone, quite frankly? I mean, I think they've moved the ball well the last three games, but, two of those three, they didn't get in the end zone in terms of being at home. So they've got to find a way to get in the end zone and capitalize off some of these drives. And for Seattle, a lot of talk about their first three games, didn't exactly play the 72 Dolphins. How would they look against Detroit on Monday night? Their defense was without five key players. Then they lost Julian Love in the first half. But their offense looked really good. So I think it's going to be a tough matchup for the Giants to try to slow down that offense, and we'll see what they can do on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll get to the Seahawks in a little bit. First in the Giants, and I do think it's interesting because I don't think there's any doubt that Daniel Jones is playing better than he did last year. He looks more like the player he was in 2022 than the player he looked like in 2023. No surprise, there's a better supporting cast around him. But they have not gotten the ball in the end zone enough. They're only averaging 15 points a game, which is about what they were averaging last season, and which was a disastrous season for the Giants. So I think what fans are kind of going back and forth on here is, yes, Jones looks better. Some of the things that he's had issues with is the past, getting rid of the ball quick, managing the pocket, avoiding sacks. That's all been a lot better. But he hasn't been able to connect, Andrew, on some of those deep balls down the field. And you know how the modern NFL works. You're calling games every week. If you're not connecting on, 30, 40-yard balls down the field, it's much harder to put the ball in the end zone consistently.
I said this on the air during our Houston-Jacksonville game last week, but every single week that we've had our production meeting so far this season, a team has said, you don't get a lot of deep shots. You got to take advantage of them. And I know that's something that's not necessarily groundbreaking, but I just find it so interesting that every single team has said that. And John, as you know, passing numbers are down this year. Rushing numbers are up in the majority of the NFL. And so I think there's such a priority now to when you have those deep shots, you've got to hit them. And we know the Giants did not do that with Slayton against Dallas twice. And those are things you look back on and say that could have changed the game. So when those opportunities are there, of course, you want to hit them. It's almost like in today's NFL, you need to hit them.
Yeah, you really do. Teams aren't designed anymore, Angie, to just pound the ball, right? Like if teams are, well, let me start asking you this first. When you talk to teams and coaches about not having that many opportunities down the field, is different than it was 5 or 6 years ago. What are the things that the offensive coaches tell you that defenses are doing that are limiting some of those deep shots down the field?
I mean, Houston last week for us was a perfect example. I mean, they're playing their safeties back. they're not going to get beat over the top. And Houston has the speed to do that with Diggs and Nico Collins and Tank Dell, who was injured last week. But that's, I think, a really good example. They're going to give you the underneath route, and they're scared to get beat deep. Saw that with the Colts as well this year. Anthony Richardson, he can throw it 100 yards in the air. And we don't want that to happen. So they pack it up front with the big guys and then drop the safeties back. So I think that we're seeing that a lot more of that. Teams are scared to get beat with the home run ball. So you don't get a lot of shots to do it. And when you do, you got to hit them.
Yeah, you have to hit them, or at least hit half of them, right? If you have a 50% hit rate on those, I think you're good. The problem is the Giants this year have had almost like a 0% hit rate on a lot of those deep balls, which is something that has to get better. And I think in the football that we grew up on, right, when we're watching games growing up in the 90s, if teams played that way against teams in 2001, 1995, whatever you want to look at, especially having these small, fast linebackers on the field, teams of yesteryear would have just said, all right, we're going to run the ball 35 times, average 6 yards per carry, and we're going to go home. But offenses aren't designed that way. Players from college don't come out that way to play that way. And it seems like practice time isn't allocated enough for the offensive linemen to be able to become that efficient in the run game either, where the easy answer to beating these types of defenses where you just pound the ball, offenses just are not, the players and the structures are not designed to function that way anymore.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's interesting. You see trends that change and develop over time. And this is the one that we're in right now, where we're not going to get beat deep, but we're also not necessarily built to run the ball 40, 50 times a game. So now what do we do? And we see a lot of the bubble screens. We see a lot of the quick passing game. We see underneath routes. I mean, that's kind of what it's evolved into right now. Which is interesting. And the numbers so far this year have been really fascinating to see play out. But if you think about it, we've kind of been building that way. And now here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Giants offense, I think the one thing you have to be excited about is Malik Neighbors. We'll see if he's going to play. But the pass protection for Daniel Jones has been so much better, Andrew. And 4 sacks in the last 3 games. Last year when they played the Seahawks, he got sacked 10 times in prime time. It was a disaster. So that's one thing heading into this game where you think against, and again, we'll see what the Seahawks have on the defensive line. They have a good pass rush, but all of them were hurt last week. That should at least give them the ability to protect Jones to operate a little bit better against the Seahawks defense compared to what they were able to do last year.
Yeah, I think it's on paper, the best offensive line the Giants have had in quite a few years. They're playing that way, certainly in the pass blocking part of the game. They have to improve the run blocking, and they've admitted that. And look, John, you know it. This is a game where you need your offensive line to be locked in because it's going to be loud. The most false starts, since the stadium opened of any home team in the NFL that they've drawn. It's not going to be easy to communicate, and you have to be on your P's and Q's. And I think that's a good sign for the Giants going into that game because they have an experienced line that seems to be playing as a cohesive unit, and that's going to have to continue against Seattle.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Have you called a game in that building before, Andrew? An NFL game?
I have. It's loud. I mean,
it's loud.
I would say it's probably the loudest. I mean, Buffalo gets up there too when they got that building rolling. But Seattle is no doubt it's not fake. It's a real thing. You got to deal with it.
No, it's bad. Minnesota a couple years ago in that playoff game in 22, that got in that new building, that got very loud. But you're right. It makes it very hard to operate. And that gives the defensive line an advantage, right? You got to use the silent count. You can't use the hard count. And that puts a little bit of pressure on the offensive line to pass protect, but also to run the ball. So you don't get into those third and longs when their crowd gets pumped up. And heading into that Dallas game last week for the Giants, everyone's like, oh, the Cowboys just gave up 280 yards to the Ravens. They got torched the week before. Then the Giants run it 24 times for 26 yards. I mean, I don't think any of us saw that one coming. So you're right. That's a fundamental thing that I think needs to be better this week, just so Mike McDonald can't get into his bag on third downs when he's so effective.
No doubt. I mean, you look at the numbers from last week, and it's really surprising they couldn't do more damage in the run game, especially against that Dallas defense. They have to run the ball better. I mean, there's no doubt about it that has to be a big part of the offense. It has to be a big part of every team's offense. You can't. There's no more run and shoot offense where you throw it 50 times a game. Although Seattle kind of did that Monday night against Detroit.
Not by choice. They happened to be down
not by choice.
Scores.
No, they were chasing the whole night. They had to throw the ball. And the Giants don't want to be in a position where they're chasing. So the onus is on the offensive line. It's on Singletary. It's on Tracy. These guys have got to provide a spark in the run game on Sunday.
Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. And, you mentioned the Seattle defense. They're very banged up. But you've seen these Mike McDonald defenses calling the AFC games for a long time, doing these Ravens games. What makes him, and I'm sure you've talked to him too, what makes him such a good defensive coach and the way he kind of runs this scheme?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, not taking any credit away from him, but he's a Raven, and they've had that defense going back for 24 years. I mean, it's unbelievable that not only have they had some incredible defensive coordinators, but so many times they promoted from within.
Yeah.
And I think that is just, it tells you that they've got the winning formula. They know what they're doing on defense. So it's swarming, it's takeaways. I mean, last year they led the NFL or tied for the most takeaways on defense in Baltimore. And I've met with him several times. He's a very energetic guy, but in a way, an old school guy too. So he's not going to try to reinvent the wheel. We did see him go for 2 when they were down by 8 against Detroit on Monday night. So he does lean on analytics a little bit, but he wants to win with defense. They did that in Baltimore for his time there, and he's going to try to do it again here in Seattle. So really interesting guy, youngest head coach in the NFL, but he's been around some great players and some great mentors in Baltimore. So he's very clued in on what to do defensively.
Yeah, and I'd say, Andrew, aside from week 1 when the Giants had to face the Vikings, and who knew when you lined up week 1 home versus the Vikings, you'd be playing the best team in the NFC. I mean, this is why the NFL is great. You never know what team's going to be awesome, right? But this is probably the best offensive personnel the Giants have seen in the game since. I mean, they are loaded with weapons here. Kenneth Walker's so much fun. They got 3 wide receivers. I mean, we'll get to Geno Smith in a second, but the weapons around him, they are just phenomenal.
DK Metcalf, first player in franchise history with 3 straight 100-yard receiving games. Jackson Smith and Jigba is a very dangerous player. And Tyler Lockett is still there at the age of 32. Those 3 guys alongside Walker, and you're right, John. This is a really tough offense. I thought their offense looked great the other night in Detroit. I mean, they put up a lot of points. I know the Lions were missing a couple of defensive players as well, but they've got this offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who was at University of Washington the last couple of years. We saw what he did with Penix and with Rome Odunze. We saw a lateral in the middle of the game. They pulled out a lot of different stops, but ultimately they had Walker, to pick them up in the run game. So you're right. The Giants will be tested. This is a very dangerous offensive unit.
Yeah, it seems like they're learning how to use Jackson Smith and Jigba too. He had some injury issues as a rookie. He's really playing well in that classic kind of slot, change of direction, short to medium range type of passing game.
Yeah, big fan of him. And look, all 3 they have a lot of diversity in that wide receiver room, right? You got 3 guys that do different things. I think that helps. I mean, not that they can only run certain routes, but there's so much versatility there, and they all provide a little different something. So if it's all right, we need a big play to spark us, let's get something physical going. Let's go to DK Metcalf. All right, Lockett can take the top off of defense. Let's throw one deep to him. Smith and Jigba, great route runner underneath. And they all kind of have their role in this offense, and it just gels really well.
Yeah, same deal with the running back position. Zach Charbonnet, nobody talks about him. He's a nice downhill, powerful back. And then you have Kenneth Walker. You hand him the ball. The play might be designed to go left. Doesn't mean the ball is going left. He'll take it right. He'll cut it back. He breaks tackles. The play on Monday night where he's basically doing like breakdancing moves to stay off the ground as he's being tackled by Anzalone. I think those 2 backs really complement each other, with Charbonnet as the grinder and Kenneth Walker as kind of the big play guy.
Yeah, we met with Walker a couple times last year, and he told us that his dad told him use the whole field when you run the ball. And when you think of that quote and you watch him run, he really does that. As you said, going left, now he's on the right side, he's flipping over guys. The play is never over with Kenneth Walker. You got to get him to the ground. And you're right, Charbonnet is a really nice compliment. They can do a lot of different things offensively. They have a lot of nice pieces.
And that's because Geno Smith is playing the best football of his career. Some of the passes he threw on Monday night, on the move into small windows, He will just put the ball into these spots. He does not care. He's navigating the pocket well. Geno Smith, I mean, no one would have believed you if you said this 5 years ago, was developed into one of the better, smarter, veteran quarterbacks in the league. That is kind of a big play waiting to happen.
It's really amazing what he's done with his career, because you and I are from New Jersey area here, and you saw him with the Jets, and it did not go well. Then the 1 year with the Giants when he started for Eli to break the streak, and just all the criticism, all the fire that he dealt with. I mean, I think a lot of people when he left thought, well, we probably won't see him again. Like, he's probably done. And you think of what he's done now, NFL Comeback Player of the Year in 22, Pro Bowl again last year. He was on fire on Monday night in Detroit. I can't give the guy enough credit for what he's done with his career, because I don't think a lot of people, myself included, thought he would turn into this, but he has, and he really deserves it. He's worked hard. He's put in his time. He's learned from some really good people, and it's paying off right now for Seattle and Geno.
Yeah, I'm curious if the coaches you've talked to have said anything to you about this, how I think this year all NFL fans and front officers should learn a lesson as to what Baker Mayfield's doing, what Sam Darnold's doing, what Geno Smith is doing. These are three quarterbacks that were left for dead. They've all been on 3 or 4 teams over the course, I think at least 4 teams for all 3 guys, actually, over the course of their career. And now you could argue Smith, Darnold, and Mayfield might be playing the best football of any quarterbacks in the conference. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Throw Joe Flacco into that conversation if you want to go back to last year and even how we finished the game for the Colts against the Steelers last week. It is crazy. It's a funny position, and you just never know. But, I mean, the Browns with Baker Mayfield, I think they still want him. I mean, it's unbelievable. But credit to these guys, too, because they've worked hard. They've taken their lumps. They've dealt with a lot of criticism, and they've come out on the other side even better for it.
I think it just shows that the quarterback position, snaps and time matters, right? Even look at the rookie like Jaden Daniels. He had 50 starts in college. You don't think that's paying off for him right now? You got to be patient with these guys. Sometimes at that position, it just doesn't click right away.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's a great point. Yeah, I think Anthony Richardson, a guy we talked about earlier, he hasn't had those starts. And you see some of the flashes of brilliance, but you also see that completion percentage under 50%. I mean, it takes time. You need experience. And the guys that you mentioned, John, have that experience, and then they're playing great.
Yeah. And then just real quick on their offensive line for Seattle, if there's one weakness on the offense, I think it's there. Their right tackle, Stone Forsythe, had some issues in that game against Aiden Hutchinson. Granted, a lot of people have issues with Aiden Hutchinson. I don't want to, be too hard on the guy. But even their interior guys, Andrew, I feel like if the Giants are going to slow down the Seahawks offense, is going to have to happen up front, and they're going to have to win those battles with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. That's how they're going to slow down this Seahawks offense.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think that this is the game for Burns and Thibodeau to really, they got to break out. They have to be a big part. If the Giants are going to win this game, Burns, Thibodeau, Lawrence have to be a big part of the win. I think they have to have that pressure up on Geno Smith. I think they have to win their one-on-ones against that offensive line. I think that if you tell me on Monday that the Giants won the game, I think you're going to say that their defensive front got after the quarterback, had some sacks, and applied some pressure, and that's going to be how they're going to win this one.
What other matchups or keys are you keeping an eye on for the Giants to pull off this upset?
John, I'd like to see them have their tight ends be a part of the game plan here. I mean, I think that they're missing that element of it. We know that they only have 5 catches as a group, I believe, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I know Manhurts is not a pass-catching tight end. He's been a blocker his whole career, but it would be nice to see Bellinger and Johnson become a bigger part. I think that just that little outlet, that little, break that Jones can maybe give Neighbors or Wandale just to get the tight ends involved. I think that could really help this Giants offense.
Giants Huddle is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. Citizens will donate $750 to the Giants Foundation for each scoring drive during the 2024 season. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. And you just want to go around the league with you for a second because you've done a bunch of games. You talked to coaches. You did the Jacksonville game last week, correct?
Correct.
What's going on with the Jaguars?
A lot. And I would say a lot's going on with the Jaguars. It's not good right now. They actually played pretty well down in Houston, but just again came up short. They were winning that week 1 game in Miami, and Travis Etienne was going in and he fumbled out of the end zone, and nothing has been the same since. I think Trevor Lawrence, admittedly, and Doug Peterson has backed it up, has been pressing, forcing the issue, got the big contract in the offseason, trying to do something with it, and it's backfired. And, in that division, maybe you have a little more time to maybe try to dig out of it. But they are a desperate football team right now, and they're really searching in Jacksonville.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
What other things that you've seen or watched over the first few weeks have kind of struck you as either surprises or things that have really just kind of struck a chord with you that fans should start paying attention to throughout the year?
Yeah, we've seen some interesting games. Our group, we had the Raiders beat the Ravens in week 2. I mean, I think a lot of people would not have expected that to happen. I still think Baltimore is a really good team. We saw that on Sunday night against Buffalo. So I just think that sometimes it's hard to go into a game and say, I think most people would have used the Raiders as their survivor pick week 2 in Baltimore, and Baltimore lost.
I think they did.
Yeah, and I actually mentioned that on the air at the end of the game. So I just think that, yes, maybe on paper you're a touchdown underdog, but that does not mean anything in today's NFL. There's so much parity. These teams are so close. You just don't know what's going to happen.
I think especially early in the year, right? With only a few preseason games, you're not practicing as much. I feel like you don't quite know what any of these teams are until you get into almost mid-October now. Yeah,
and I think that you see rust because teams don't play a lot of players in the preseason. I think you see some sloppy football. I mean, some of the penalties, the Giants-Cowboys game, so flag after flag. I think some of that stuff starts to get cleaned up come October and into November.
What do you think the Chiefs are going to do? Are they going to have to go find a receiver?
It seems that way. I think it's a testament to how good they are and how they can just kind of rotate piece in after piece out. But at the same time, I think at some point it could catch up to them. And I think there are receivers on the market. So I'm sure they're going to be looking. But I think they do need one more piece to try to help them get over the top and just make sure that they have enough gas at the end of the season to go into the playoffs.
Now, unfortunately for them, the one team that has a wide receiver available is in their division, and I don't think the Raiders are going to help the Chiefs out with Devontae Adams. I don't think they're doing that. Do you think he ends up leaving, or you think the whole he has a big salary, it's a tough thing to move, these trades are tough to do midseason with the cap? Do you think Adams ends up staying, or do you think he winds up playing for another team this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you read the tea leaves, it doesn't look good right now for him to stay in Las Vegas.
No.
As I said, we met with him week 2. Really nice guy, said all the right things, seemed like he was happy, but these things change quickly. So, his old quarterback is in New Orleans. They were college teammates, him and Derek Carr. But, I'm sure that any team would want him. I still think he's a very good player in this league.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, finally, any team that you're keeping an eye on that you've seen maybe that you think fans might be sleeping on that could turn things on and really be a factor heading late into this year into the playoffs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if Houston's really a sleeper, but they're a very confident group. I know they got killed in week 3 in Minnesota, but they've got a little moxie to them, and they haven't had Joe Mixon these last few games. And I think they've really missed that part of their run game and really what that does for their offense. Because then, as we talked about earlier, you get the play action involved, then you can take some deep shots with their weapons. So I think once they get a Joe Mixon back, they're going to be a really dangerous team in the AFC. They have a very good defense. DeMeco Ryans has them energized, and I don't think a lot of people are, but just because they lost so bad to Minnesota, I wouldn't sleep on the Texans.
All right, finally, inside broadcasting question. I know nobody probably cares about this answer except for me. You've been working a 3-man booth this year, right? You've had Tiki with you, and you have one of the McCourty brothers, Jason with you, right? And what has it been like trying to work with those guys? 2 guys that have done broadcasting for a while, but haven't maybe done games together before, trying to kind of get that chemistry right. Did you guys work games in the offseason together to kind of do some practice? How have you guys tried to kind of bring that together? Because it's tough sometimes to just find time for two analysts to say what they need to say during these games.
Yeah, it's a challenge, no doubt. I mean, last year we had myself, Tiki, and Matt Ryan, and I felt like towards the end of the year, you figure each other out, you get in a good little rhythm. But then Matt, to his credit, goes to the studio this year, and so it's me, Tiki, and Jason McCourty, and he's someone who I didn't really know that well until the spring. I met him for the first time really in the spring. We did a practice game. They put our booth together. We called a preseason game together on CBS, and what's really interesting is I can feel just each and every week we make, little steps forward. And I think at the end of the year, we'll probably be where we were last year with Matt and Tiki. But it's a challenge more so for the two of them. Who gets in on the replay? Who's going to take this point? Who's going to talk about that? And I'm going to call the play, John. But then who's going to get in after that? So there's a lot of hand signals. There's a lot of tapping on the shoulder. There's a lot of communication. And it takes time. But over time, I'm really excited to be with these two guys, and happy that Tiki gets to call another Giants game. We were talking earlier about the training camp days in Albany. I remember waiting for Tiki to come out of the cafeteria so I could interview him. And now to be with him every week is a neat thing, and I'm happy to be his partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best thing about that booth is you by far have the best hair of anyone in that broadcast booth, Andrew. I mean, it's
funny, John, is that I forgot my hair gel last week in Houston, and I couldn't call either one of them to help me out. So it was very frustrating. I had to go to CVS and get some hair gel.
Now, one of those guys could have offered you a razor, but I'm not sure you wanted to go there.
No, I don't want to do that just yet.
No, I don't think so. Andrew, good stuff. Giant fans will have a chance to enjoy that broadcast team. You got Andrew, Tiki, and Jason. They will be on the call for Giants and Seahawks, 4:25 on CBS. Andrew, thanks so much for the time, man, and we look forward to seeing you out there in Seattle.
Anytime. Thanks, John.
That's the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. We'll see you next time, everybody.